In the year 1752, off the coast of Norway, something impossible rose from the depths. The fishing vessel Sankt Erik had cast its nets into what the crew believed were familiar waters. But as they began to haul in their catch, the ocean itself seemed to resist. The nets grew impossibly heavy. The water around their boat began to darken and churn. And then, breaking the surface like a living island, came something that defied every law of nature the fishermen thought they knew. Tentacles. Massive, writhing arms as thick as ancient tree trunks reaching skyward from the abyss. The creature they glimpsed was so enormous that the fishermen could not see where it ended and the sea began. Its eyes, they would later swear, were as large as dinner plates, glowing with an intelligence that seemed almost human. The encounter lasted mere moments. The beast, perhaps as startled as the men who had disturbed its realm, sank back into the depths, leaving only a churning whirlpool and the overwhelming stench of the deep ocean. But those fishermen had witnessed something that would haunt maritime folklore for generations to come. They had seen the Kraken. For over 1,000 years, this creature has stalked the imagination of seafaring peoples. From the fjords of Scandinavia to the trading ports of medieval Europe, from the pages of ancient sagas to the silver screens of Hollywood, the Kraken has remained the ocean's ultimate monster. A beast so vast it could be mistaken for an island, so powerful it could drag entire ships to the bottom of the sea with a single sweep of its mighty arms. But what is the truth behind this maritime myth? How did a creature of Scandinavian folklore become the most famous sea monster in the world? And most remarkably, how did fishermen's tales of an impossible beast eventually lead scientists to one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of marine biology? This is the story of humanity's most enduring sea monster. This is the true history of the Kraken. The birth of a monster. To understand the Kraken, we must first journey back to the harsh, storm-lashed waters of medieval Scandinavia. Here, in the treacherous seas between Norway and Iceland, generations of Viking sailors and Norse fishermen lived their lives at the mercy of an ocean that seemed actively hostile to human presence. This was a world where the line between the natural and supernatural was razor thin. The medieval Norse inhabited a cosmos teeming with invisible forces, gods who walked among mortals, giants who shaped the landscape with their footsteps, and sea serpents who could circle the entire world. In this rich mythological environment, the ocean was not empty water, but a living entity, populated by creatures both wonderful and terrible. The earliest written reference to what would become the Kraken appears in the 13th century Konungsjugaska, or the King's Mirror, a Norwegian educational text. But the creature described here bears little resemblance to the tentacled monster we know today. Instead, it speaks of havstrøm, enormous sea creatures of uncertain form, so large they could be mistaken for islands. The text describes sailors who, spotting what they assumed to be a small island, would land their boats to gather fresh water or hunt for food. Only when the island began to move, diving back into the depths with terrifying speed, would the horrified sailors realize their mistake. They had landed on the back of a sea monster. This motif, the creature so vast it resembles land itself, would become central to the Kraken legend. It spoke to a fundamental fear of medieval seafarers, that the ocean concealed threats so enormous they challenged human understanding of scale itself. But it was not until the 18th century that the creature received its most famous name and its most detailed description. This transformation came through the work of one man, Bishop Pontoppidan, the Bishop of Bergen and a passionate natural historian. The Scholar and the Beast. Bishop Pontoppidan was a product of the Age of Enlightenment, a time when educated Europeans sought to catalog and understand the natural world with unprecedented rigor. Yet he was also a man deeply rooted in the folklore traditions of his homeland. This unique position allowed him to bridge the gap between ancient superstition and emerging scientific method. In 1752, Pontoppidan published his masterwork, Natural History of Norway. Within its pages, alongside descriptions of familiar Norwegian wildlife, appeared one of the most detailed accounts of the Kraken ever recorded. Pontoppidan's creature was not merely large, it was apocalyptic in scale. According to the bishop's research, the Kraken was a creature the size of an island. Specifically, he estimated it at 1.5 miles in diameter. When it surfaced, which happened only rarely, it would create such disturbance in the water that sailors would mistake the churning for dangerous shoals or hidden reefs. But Pontoppidan's Kraken possessed a more subtle power than mere size. The creature, he claimed, was the greatest fisherman in the ocean. Its massive body would emit substances that attracted enormous schools of fish. Norwegian fishermen had learned to recognize the signs. When the fish were usually plentiful and the water had a particular quality, they knew they were fishing above the Kraken. This created an extraordinary risk-reward scenario. The fishing above the Kraken was legendary in its abundance. A single day's catch could feed a village for weeks. But if the creature stirred, if it decided to dive back into the depths, the resulting whirlpool could drag down every boat fishing above it. Pontoppidan's account was revolutionary because it treated the Kraken not as a supernatural entity, but as a natural creature worthy of scientific study. He interviewed fishermen, collected eyewitness accounts, and attempted to understand the beast's behavior and habitat. His work represented the first serious effort to document the Kraken through the lens of natural history rather than folklore. Yet even as Pontoppidan tried to apply scientific rigor to the legend, his accounts retained an element of the fantastic that would ensure the Kraken's place in popular imagination for centuries to come. The Kraken goes global. The publication of Pontoppidan's Natural History had an effect his author could never have anticipated. The detailed, seemingly authoritative account of the Kraken spread far beyond the shores of Norway, capturing the imagination of writers, artists, and intellectuals across Europe and beyond. The creature found its way into the works of Enlightenment thinkers, who were fascinated by the idea of unknown monsters lurking in unexplored regions of the world. The great Swedish taxonomist Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern biological classification, included the Kraken in early editions of his Systema Naturae, giving it the scientific name Sepia microcosmos, literally the squid as large as the world. However, Linnaeus was skeptical. By later editions of his work, he had removed the creature entirely, noting that no reliable evidence of its existence had been found. This tension between wonder and skepticism would characterize the Kraken's reception throughout the scientific revolution. But while scientists debated its reality, the Kraken was conquering the world of literature and popular culture. Alfred Lord Tennyson immortalized it in his 1830 poem, The Kraken, painting a picture of an ancient creature sleeping in the deepest trenches of the ocean. Below the thunders of the upper deep, far, far beneath in the abyssal sea, his ancient, dreamless, uninvaded sleep, the Kraken sleepeth. Jules Verne brought it into the age of scientific romance with his 1870 novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Verne's giant squid battling Captain Nemo's Nautilus became one of the most memorable scenes in adventure literature. Here, the Kraken was no longer a vague island-sized mystery, but a specific creature, a colossal squid with defined tentacles, a parrot-like beak, and intelligence enough to engage in combat with human technology. The image of the tentacled sea monster spread through Victorian culture like wildfire. It appeared in newspaper illustrations, museum exhibitions, and the popular penny dreadfuls that thrilled working-class readers with tales of maritime horror. The Kraken had evolved from a regional folklore creature into a global symbol of the ocean's unknown dangers. The science of sea monsters.
The first scientifically documented encounter with a giant squid occurred in 1639 when a massive specimen was stranded on a beach in Iceland. But it wasn't until the 1850s that marine biologists began to take these discoveries seriously as evidence of a genuine species of enormous cephalopod. The breakthrough came through the work of Professor Japatus Steenstrup at the University of Copenhagen. Steenstrup had access to several specimens of what were clearly squid parts, but squid parts on a scale that defied imagination. A single tentacle section measured over 3 feet in length. Beak fragments were larger than a man's fist. In 1857, Steenstrup published his findings and gave the creature its official scientific name, Architeuthis dux, the ruling giant squid. For the first time, the Kraken had been accepted into legitimate scientific classification. But accepting the existence of giant squid and actually observing one alive were two entirely different challenges. The creatures appeared to live in the deep ocean, surfacing only rarely and usually only when sick or dying. For decades, science possessed only fragments, tantalizing pieces of a puzzle that suggested creatures of extraordinary size and power. Then came the testimony of the whalers. Sperm whales, it turned out, were the giant squid's primary predator. As whaling expanded throughout the 19th century, whale hunters began reporting increasingly detailed encounters with the legendary sea monsters. They found squid tentacles in whale stomachs, some measuring over 30 feet in length. They discovered whales with circular sucker scars across their bodies, battle wounds from fights with giant squid. Most dramatically, they occasionally witnessed the battles themselves. Whaling ships reported seeing massive tentacles wrapped around the heads of sperm whales, the two giants locked in mortal combat on the ocean's surface before disappearing back into the depths. These accounts provided crucial data about the creature's behavior, habitat, and size. But they also raised new questions. If giant squid were large enough to battle sperm whales, creatures that could grow to 60 feet in length, just how big could they become? The Great Squid Rush. The late 19th century witnessed what historians now call the Great Squid Rush, a period when giant squid specimens began appearing with unprecedented frequency along the coasts of Newfoundland and New England. Between 1870 and 1890, dozens of giant squid were discovered, caught, or observed in North American waters. The specimens ranged from juveniles, no larger than a human, to monsters with tentacles measuring over 50 feet in length. Museums competed to acquire the best specimens, and newspapers breathlessly reported each new discovery. The most famous of these encounters occurred in 1878, when fishermen in Trinity Bay, Newfoundland, discovered a giant squid in shallow water.
The creature was still alive, but appeared to be sick or injured. Local naturalist Moses Harvey purchased the squid and arranged for it to be photographed, creating some of the first images of a complete giant squid specimen. Harvey's photographs were a sensation. They showed a creature that perfectly matched the descriptions from folklore and literature: a massive head, enormous eyes, and tentacles of incredible length and power. The Kraken, it seemed, was real. But these discoveries also raised troubling questions about the relationship between folklore and scientific fact. The giant squid were undoubtedly real, and they were certainly large. But were they large enough to justify the most extreme claims of the Kraken legend? The largest confirmed giant squid specimens measured around 40 to 50 feet in total length. Certainly enormous, but not the mile-wide islands described by Pontoppidan. They were powerful creatures, but did they possess the supernatural abilities attributed to the Kraken of folklore? As scientific knowledge of giant squid expanded, a curious split began to develop. The creature was simultaneously being demystified by science and re-mythologized by popular culture. The more scientists learned about real giant squid, the more fantastical the fictional Kraken became. Into the abyss. The 20th century brought new technologies that promised to finally solve the mystery of the Kraken once and for all. Deep-sea research vessels, underwater cameras, and advanced sonar systems allowed scientists to explore the deep depths where giant squid were believed to live. Yet paradoxically, the more sophisticated the technology became, the more elusive the giant squid proved to be. Researchers found increasing evidence of their existence: more specimens, more tentacle scars, more tentacle fragments, but living giant squid remained ghostly presences in the deep ocean. This technological cat-and-mouse game played out over decades. Researchers would deploy cameras in areas where giant squid were thought to live, only to retrieve footage of empty water. They would use submersibles to explore deep-sea canyons where squid had been caught, finding nothing but the usual deep-sea fauna. The frustration was enormous. Science had developed the tools to explore space, to peer inside atoms, to map the human genome. Yet a creature that shared our planet, that had been the subject of human stories for over 1,000 years, remained beyond our reach. This elusivity only added to the Kraken's mystique. In popular culture, the creature became increasingly supernatural, increasingly impossible. Movies like Clash of the Titans and Pirates of the Caribbean portrayed Kraken as mythological entities that could sink fleets and reshape coastlines with their power. The disconnect between the scientific reality of giant squid and the cultural fantasy of the Kraken had never been greater. Science had proven that enormous squid existed, but it had also revealed their limitations. They were not island-sized. They could not sink ships with their tentacles alone. They were, for all their impressive size, recognizably natural creatures. The first encounter. After decades of frustration, the breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source. In 2004, Japanese researchers Tsunemi Kubodera and Kyoichi Mori were studying sperm whales in the North Pacific when they had an idea. Instead of trying to find giant squid directly, why not use the whale's own hunting behavior as a guide? The approach worked. On September 30th, 2004, at a depth of 900 meters off the coast of Japan, their cameras captured the first photographs of a living giant squid in its natural habitat.
The images were revolutionary. They showed not the sluggish, dying creature of previous encounters, but active, powerful predator. The squid's tentacles moved with purpose and intelligence, investigating the bait and ultimately becoming entangled with the research line. More importantly, the photographs revealed behaviors that no one had expected. The giant squid was not passively drifting through the deep ocean, but actively hunting, using its massive tentacles to grab prey with surprising speed and precision. The creature photographed by Kubodera and Mori measured about 8 meters, 26 feet in length, not including the 2 longest tentacles, which had been torn off during the encounter. It was smaller than the largest specimens found washed up on beaches, but it was alive, healthy, and demonstrating the hunting behaviors that had made the Kraken legend so terrifying to ancient mariners. 3 years later, the same research team achieved even a greater breakthrough. In December 2007, they managed to film a giant squid at the surface, the first video footage of a living giant squid ever recorded.
The footage was extraordinary. It showed a creature of alien beauty, its skin shifting through brilliant patterns of red and white as it moved through the water. Its eyes, the size of dinner plates, reflected the camera lights with an intelligence that seemed almost aware of being observed. But perhaps most importantly, the video finally revealed the true scale of these creatures. The squid filmed in 2007 measured over 10 meters in length, and researchers estimated it could have reached 15 meters when fully grown. The new Kraken. The discovery of living giant squid did not diminish the Kraken legend, it transformed it. Scientists now knew that creatures measuring up to 50 feet in length, with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles powerful enough to battle sperm whales, really did exist in the ocean's depths. But the research also revealed an even more remarkable truth. The giant squid was not alone. As deep-sea exploration technology continued to advance, scientists discovered that the ocean contained an entire ecosystem of enormous cephalopods. In the Southern Ocean around Antarctica, researchers encountered the colossal squid, Mythonichetutis hamiltoni, a creature that might be even larger than the giant squid. Unlike their more famous cousins, colossal squid possessed not just suction cups on their tentacles, but rotating hooks capable of inflicting devastating wounds on their prey. Specimens of colossal squid found in the stomachs of sperm whales suggested creatures of extraordinary size, possibly approaching 60 feet in length and weighing up to 1,500 pounds. These were creatures that could legitimately claim the title of largest invertebrates on Earth. The discovery of multiple species of enormous squid has fundamentally changed our understanding of the deep ocean. Far from being an empty void, the abyss appears to be home to some of the largest and most powerful predators on the planet. But perhaps most remarkable discovery has been the intelligence of these creatures. Giant squid possess the largest brains of any invertebrate, with neural structures that suggest complex behavior and problem-solving abilities. The ancient folklore that described the Kraken as a creature of supernatural intelligence may have been more accurate than anyone realized. Modern research has revealed that giant squid use sophisticated hunting strategies, complex communication through changes in skin color and pattern, and social behaviors that are only beginning to be understood. They are not simply enormous versions of common squid, but highly evolved predators perfectly adapted to life in the deepest parts of the ocean. The eternal mystery. Today, More than 20 years after the first photographs of living giant squid, these creatures remain among the most mysterious animals on Earth. Despite technological advances that allow us to explore the deepest ocean trenches, encounters with giant squid remain extraordinarily rare. This elusiveness has ensured that the Kraken legend continues to evolve. Modern popular culture has embraced the scientific reality of giant squid while maintaining the mythological power of the original folklore. Movies, video games, and literature continue to feature Kraken-inspired creatures that blend scientific accuracy with fantastical elements. But the true legacy of the Kraken lies not in its cultural impact, but in what it has taught us about the relationship between folklore and scientific discovery. The thousand-year journey from Norse sea monster to confirmed species represents one of the most remarkable examples of folklore leading science to genuine discovery. The fishermen who first reported encounters with island-side sea creatures were not simply creating entertaining stories, they were documenting real encounters with real animals, creatures so far outside normal human experience that they could only be described in mythological terms. The Kraken legend preserved essential information about these creatures across centuries when no scientific framework existed to understand them. The folklore descriptions of enormous size, powerful tentacles, and intelligent behavior all proved to be accurate when scientists finally encountered living specimens. This suggests a profound truth about the relationship between human culture and the natural world. Our myths and legends are not simply fantasies divorced from reality. They are often our earliest attempts to understand and categorize experiences that exceed our current knowledge. The Kraken reminds us that the ocean still holds secrets that challenge our understanding of life on Earth. Despite covering more than 70% of our planet's surface, we have explored less than 5% of the ocean's depths. In that vast, largely unknown realm, creatures of extraordinary size and power continue to live their lives largely beyond human observation. They are the ancient Kraken, and they are real.